So there could have been two possible prompters. One is that the bank itself reported the case to a central bureau at FedPol. Swiss banks have the obligation under the Anti-Money Laundering Act to report suspicious transactions to the supervisory authority. That supervisory authority is called the MROS. So that bureau would review the case at stake, and if it's serious enough, they would forward it to the public prosecutor to open a formal investigation. So probably that is what happened in that case. The other prompter could have been that the office of the public prosecutor got aware of serious crimes and that they spontaneously opened an investigation. Well, we are not sure what appeals are being made. It's a formal process in Switzerland, so nobody can interfere with that process. Once the investigation is opened, the offender would be heard probably by the authorities. If he's not heard in Lebanon, he would be heard in Switzerland. So it's a very formal process. The authorities in Lebanon cannot interfere in the process. There is what we know in Switzerland, a separation of power, which means that the case is not in the hands of any other authority but the public prosecutor himself, which means nobody can interfere. It's not in the hands of a member of parliament, it's not in the hands of the Swiss government, and it's certainly not in the hands of any diplomats abroad. So that case will be handled by the office of the public prosecutor with no interference. So what we know is that the public prosecutor has confirmed that they opened an investigation for aggravated money laundering. It is aggravated, which means it's not petty crimes, it's not small money laundering crimes. What is aggravated crime? An aggravated crime is when the offender achieves a large turnover or substantial profit through commercial money laundering. So it has to be either large turnover or substantial profit. And this is what would make it aggravated. There could be another two options. The first one would be that the offender is a member of a criminal organization. So we're talking about a serious case. And the third option would be that a group has been formed for the purpose of laundering money. So in these three cases, we talk about aggravated money laundering. We have to keep that in mind. First, it means that it's a serious case. It means that there are large sums at stake. We're not talking about a couple of 100,000. It's aggravated. It's 5 years of imprisonment. It's a very serious offense in Switzerland, aggravated money laundering, one of the most serious offenses. There has been many, actually. Swiss banks would regularly report to the Central Bureau at FedPol suspicious transactions. Last year, some 7,000 cases have been reported, but the Central Bureau would act as a screen, which means that only the most serious cases would end up with the public prosecutor. Well, central bank governor of a sovereign country, to my knowledge, this has never happened, but PEP happens cases relating to PEP would happen very often. So it's something that Swiss authorities know how to deal with. And this is why I believe that they're comfortable enough to launch such an investigation, because they both have the knowledge and the background and enough experience to deal with cases like this one. So the ambiguity probably comes from the fact that the investigation was open for aggravated money laundering. As we said, aggravated means there are substantial amounts at stake. So that confirms that we're talking about big amounts here. It's not small. And the other thing is that the prosecutor will not communicate on this case or confirm the exact figures we're talking about, because there is this principle which is called the confidentiality of the investigation, and that no information regarding the investigation itself or the offender would be released at this stage by the public prosecutor. Well, it's not a big deal in Switzerland because banks would regularly freeze assets when we talk about money laundering or aggravated money laundering. So it's something quite common. Swiss banks would automatically freeze the assets as a preventive measure, even though they don't have the formal obligation to do so, even though they haven't received an official order from the public prosecutor. It's cautious for a Swiss bank when it comes to aggravated money laundering to automatically freeze the assets to prevent any further transfers abroad and allow the prosecutor to do his investigation. Well, Switzerland has had a history of dealing with PEPs and embezzled assets and ill-gotten assets and corruption. And it's not the first time that this happens. And it's true that we can ask ourselves, why is it that we reach such a situation where years later we have to report suspicious transactions? We don't know in this case what transaction it is, but we know that it's not recent. And questions should be asked with respect to all banks, wherever they are in Switzerland and abroad, about their role in assisting directly or indirectly in the embezzlement of public funds. They would need more information about what happened in Switzerland. They could request mutual assistance to other countries, France, the US, Luxembourg or Liechtenstein, or the UK. So that is feasible. So there would be a cooperation between the Swiss authorities and any other relevant authority which could have information to share with Switzerland. Well, the public prosecutor will at this stage not release any further information. We have heard that a lawyer has been appointed for Mr. Slameh in Switzerland, and they will probably make a declaration soon, so we should wait for that. What we should also expect is a reply from the Lebanese authorities to Switzerland to clarify the background of the transaction and give a formal reply to the Swiss authorities following the list of questions that they have received. And this is why Mr. Slameh has been heard. He could decide to come to Switzerland. That is always an option, to come and have a direct interview with the public prosecutor. That will certainly speed up the matter, to have a direct interview with the public prosecutor. Otherwise, they will still have to go through international cooperation with the Lebanese authorities. What has been taboo for many years is no longer taboo, it seems, because nobody would have expected the governor of any central bank in the world to be investigated. So that is premiere for Lebanon. We can anticipate that this is only a Pandora box that has been opened, and that Swiss banks will start reporting more suspicious transactions when it comes to Lebanese politically exposed people. So it could be the starter of a longer story, or it could just end here if we very quickly reach the conclusion that it is an isolated case and that there is no money laundering, that is not aggravated, and that it's business as usual, which is nothing suspicious to report. Well, it usually takes several years for the public prosecutor to reach a conclusion in his investigations, and we should let the public prosecutor investigate without interference. It's a long process. It could be speeded up if the offender comes to Switzerland for an interview, if he's willing to share information, if the Lebanese authorities cooperate, and if any other authority involved would cooperate with Switzerland swiftly. So that could help speed up the investigation, but it is very likely that this is not going to be solved within months or even a year. The public prosecutor hasn't yet issued any statement with that respect. So for the time being, we can only speculate. We don't know if he is accused, if he is suspected, or if he's just a witness. So we have to wait and see what the public prosecutor decides.